The millionaire's life was the epitome of opulence and influence, a world where luxury was the standard and appearances were everything. From the sprawling penthouse that overlooked the glittering city skyline to the private jets and exotic vacations, every facet of his existence was meticulously curated to project perfection. In public, he was the picture of charm and sophistication, a devoted husband to a beautiful, pregnant wife, and a man who seemed untouchable in both business and social circles. Every photograph, every public appearance, and every social media post painted a picture of a flawless life, one admired and envied by countless onlookers. But beneath this polished exterior lay a tension few could see. While the wife appeared radiant and content, the reality of their marriage was starkly different. In private, she often felt invisible, her needs overlooked by the very man who had promised protection, love, and devotion. Her pregnancy, which should have been a time of support and closeness, had become a period of silent suffering. Meanwhile, whispers of a mistress circulated quietly in elite circles, rumors that the millionaire dismissed publicly but indulged in privately. The mistress was not merely a fleeting distraction, she was a presence that threatened the delicate balance of his marriage, a constant reminder that the facade of perfection was anything but real. The air of sophistication and wealth could not mask the cracks forming beneath the surface. The tension was palpable, a slow-burning undercurrent that would eventually demand attention. Every lavish dinner, every social gala, and every display of affection for the mistress instead of his wife built a hidden narrative of betrayal. What appeared flawless to the world was riddled with deception, selfish choices, and emotional neglect. The stage was set for conflict, and the seeds of heartbreak were quietly taking root, promising a storm that would shatter the illusion of the perfect life the millionaire had so carefully crafted. The pregnant wife navigated each day with a growing sense of isolation, a stark contrast to the opulent lifestyle that surrounded her. While the world saw a smiling, graceful woman adorned in designer clothes and jewelry, the truth was far more painful. Each morning brought new aches and discomforts, the weight of her pregnancy physically exhausting her and emotionally leaving her vulnerable. She longed for comfort, for the simple reassurance of her husband's presence, but his attention was reserved for indulgence, social events, and the mistress who seemed to occupy every space he valued most. Loneliness became her constant companion. In the quiet moments, she would sit by the window of their luxurious penthouse, gazing at the city below, feeling invisible in a life that was supposed to be defined by love and care. She remembered the promises whispered in the early days of their marriage, promises of unwavering support, protection, and shared joy in life's milestones. Yet now, those words seemed hollow, echoes of a past she could no longer cling to. Every evening, while the millionaire entertained guests, attended lavish galas, or spent private time with the mistress, she faced the swelling of her belly, the aches of her body, and the weight of emotional abandonment alone. Her emotional struggles were compounded by the physical demands of pregnancy. Nights were long, restless, and filled with pain she could not share, as the very person meant to ease her suffering was absent. The sense of invisibility gnawed at her. She craved acknowledgement not for vanity, but for the simple human need of being seen, loved, and supported. She wondered if he even noticed her growing fragility, or if she had become merely a backdrop to his pleasures and ambitions. Despite the isolation, there was a quiet resilience forming within her. She began to recognize her own strength, the courage to endure pain, the patience to navigate neglect, and the determination to protect her unborn child, no matter the absence of the man who had promised to be her partner. Each day of loneliness was also a day of preparation, a subtle shaping of character that would eventually allow her to confront betrayal and emerge stronger. In the midst of despair, she began to understand that true support could not always come from those who had failed her, and that survival, courage, and love for her child would have to come from within. The mistress moved through the millionaire's world with a confidence that was both alluring and unnerving. She knew exactly how to position herself, how to use charm, beauty, and subtle manipulation to maintain her influence over him. Her presence was magnetic, commanding attention wherever she went, yet she wielded her power quietly, ensuring the husband's admiration and indulgence without overt confrontation. Every smile, every whispered word, and every carefully timed gesture served to reinforce her role as more than just a fleeting distraction. She was a force that shaped decisions and redirected attention, often at the expense of the pregnant wife. Her days were filled with luxury and indulgence, a life in stark contrast to the growing isolation of the wife. She rode in the most opulent cars, attended the most exclusive events, and was often seen with the millionaire at social functions, side by side, radiating wealth and power. The mansion itself seemed to bend to her presence. Private rooms arranged to her taste, invitations to exclusive trips, and the constant validation of the millionaire's admiration. To an outsider, she appeared effortlessly dominant, a woman in full control of her circumstances, thriving in a world built on opulence and privilege. Yet her influence extended beyond mere luxury. She had a keen understanding of the millionaire's weaknesses, his desire for flattery, his need to be admired, and his tendency to prioritize desire over duty. Using this knowledge, she subtly reinforced her position, making him feel indispensable to her, dependent on her approval, and enmeshed in her presence. In doing so, she created an invisible barrier between him and his wife, ensuring that the pregnant woman's needs were consistently overlooked, both emotionally and physically. The contrast between the two women could not have been more stark. While the wife endured isolation, exhaustion, and emotional neglect, the mistress thrived in comfort, attention, and power. Every lavish outing and every public display of the millionaire's favor served as a reminder of the disparity, deepening the wife's sense of invisibility and highlighting the consequences of betrayal. This dynamic set the stage for tension, jealousy, and inevitable confrontation, as the stakes were no longer just about desire, but about power, respect, and the fragile emotional balance of a household divided by secrecy and manipulation. The grand ballroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers, the polished marble floors reflecting a kaleidoscope of lights. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits mingled, champagne glasses in hand, laughter and polite conversation filling the air. On the surface, it was the perfect high society gathering, a display of wealth, influence, and refinement. Yet beneath the glittering facade, an undercurrent of tension simmered, invisible to most but painfully palpable to the pregnant wife standing near the edge of the room. She had dressed carefully, choosing an elegant gown meant to convey grace and confidence, hoping that tonight she might feel noticed, supported, or at least acknowledged by her husband. But the moment they arrived, it became painfully clear that attention would not be hers. The millionaire, ever charming, gravitated immediately toward the mistress, who floated through the crowd with effortless poise, laughing lightly at his whispered jokes. Every compliment he offered, every admiring glance, was directed toward her, leaving the wife to feel like a shadow at the margins of her own life. Whispers began to circulate among the attendees. Some murmured about the obvious tension between the wife and the mistress, others speculated about the millionaire's obvious favoritism. Eyes darted toward the wife, registering her silent discomfort, her attempts to mask hurt behind polite smiles. The sensation of being overlooked, of having her presence ignored while another woman captured the spotlight, weighed heavily on her. Each compliment the millionaire lavished on the mistress, each graceful gesture that elevated her in the eyes of the elite, felt like a subtle public humiliation, a reminder that her role in his life was being minimized before an audience. Despite the emotional sting, the wife maintained her composure. She moved through the crowd with careful politeness, nodding and exchanging brief pleasantries, yet inside, a storm of hurt and resentment brewed. The disparity between her isolation and the mistress's prominence could not have been more pronounced. The event, meant to showcase status and elegance, instead amplified betrayal and neglect. It was a night where luxury and appearances clashed with reality, a night that highlighted the wife's suffering and set the stage for the emotional reckoning that would soon follow, where silence, once her refuge, would transform into strength and resolve. The quiet of the night was shattered by a sudden, sharp pain that coursed through her abdomen. The pregnant wife clutched her swollen belly, gasping as the intensity increased with every passing second. What had started as mild discomfort rapidly escalated into contractions she could no longer ignore. Panic gripped her, a terrifying mix of physical agony and emotional dread. This was the moment she had long anticipated, the moment that should have been filled with love, support, and reassurance. But the absence of her husband loomed over her like a dark cloud. Her breaths came in short, ragged bursts as she staggered toward the nearest room in the mansion, hoping to find comfort or assistance. Each contraction was sharper than the last, leaving her trembling and gasping for relief. In her mind, she replayed moments of neglect, every missed touch, every absence during times when she had needed him most. The irony was cruel. While she faced one of the most critical moments of her life, the man who had vowed to stand by her side was nowhere to be found, likely immersed in the company of the mistress. Desperation fueled her thoughts. She imagined him rushing toward her, holding her hand, whispering reassurance, providing the calm and strength she needed, but reality was crueler. Instead, she found herself isolated, struggling alone with the pain, her body working tirelessly to bring new life into the world. Fear mingled with determination as she reminded herself that she was strong, that her unborn child depended on her resilience. Every second without support intensified the emotional weight, yet it also ignited a flicker of inner resolve. The mansion, once a place of opulence and comfort, now felt cold and oppressive. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the ticking of a distant clock mocked her isolation. She could hear nothing but the rhythm of her own panicked breathing and the relentless tightening in her belly. Yet amid the fear and agony, a spark of hope remained. Hope that someone, anyone, would appear to help her, that she would not have to endure this alone. This sudden descent into urgency and pain marked the beginning of a night that would forever alter the dynamics of her marriage, testing her strength, courage, and determination in ways she had never imagined. The wife's eyes searched frantically for him, hoping that the familiar figure of her husband would appear at her side, offering comfort and support in the midst of her growing panic. But the reality was far more devastating. He was nowhere to be found. Instead of rushing to his wife, he remained immersed in the world he preferred, the one filled with luxury, indulgence, and the company of the mistress. The mansion, once a symbol of shared prosperity, now felt like a cold cage, emphasizing the emotional chasm between them. As the contractions intensified, her thoughts drifted to the countless times she had hoped for his attention, only to be met with distraction or dismissal. Every whispered promise, every assurance of love now felt like a hollow mockery. The heartbreak of being ignored at the very moment she needed him most cut deeper than any physical pain. The mistress's presence, once a subtle nuisance, now loomed as a glaring emblem of betrayal. She was visible, adored, and prioritized, while the woman carrying his child was left to endure unimaginable pain alone. The wife's emotions swirled in a storm of anger, hurt, and disbelief. How could someone she trusted so deeply choose indulgence over responsibility? The betrayal was not just emotional, it was visceral, manifesting in every tremor of fear and every pang of physical pain she endured without support. She realized that the man she had loved, who had once been her partner in dreams and life, had abandoned her in the most crucial hour, placing selfish desire above duty and compassion. Helplessness settled over her like a heavy shroud. She clutched her belly, feeling the life inside her stir, a fragile reminder of her resilience and purpose. In that moment, she understood that no matter how much she wished for his presence, she could rely only on herself and the strength growing within her. Every passing minute highlighted the stark contrast between the husband's indulgence and her isolation, cementing a painful truth. She was alone in this journey, and any support she would need had to come from sources other than the man who had pledged to stand by her side. As the wife staggered through the corridor, each contraction leaving her breathless and weak, a figure appeared seemingly out of nowhere. A stranger, impeccably dressed and radiating calm authority. He had been passing by the mansion's grounds when he noticed her distress, the way she clutched her swollen belly and struggled to move with the weight of labor pressing down on her. There was no hesitation in his eyes, only a decisive clarity that set him apart from the husband who had chosen indulgence over responsibility. Without a word of judgment, the stranger approached her, offering a steadying hand and a reassuring voice. "You're going to be okay," he said with quiet authority, his tone commanding enough to momentarily calm the storm of panic raging inside her. She glanced up, her tear-streaked face reflecting disbelief and relief. Here was someone willing to step in when the person meant to protect her had abandoned her completely. Unlike the millionaire, whose charm had been reserved for the mistress, this man's concern was immediate, genuine, and unselfish, a stark contrast that left no room for doubt about his intentions. He quickly assessed the situation, scanning the surroundings for the fastest way to get her to safety. "We need to get you to the hospital now," he said, guiding her gently but firmly toward a sleek, waiting vehicle. His movements were efficient, precise, and respectful, ensuring that she felt both supported and in control despite the pain racking her body. With every word of encouragement, he eased her fear, offering the steadiness that had been missing from her life for so long. The difference between the two men could not have been more apparent. Where her husband had indulged in distraction and vanity, the stranger embodied responsibility, courage, and compassion. Each passing moment reinforced a simple truth: when others failed her, there were still those who could rise to the occasion, who could act decisively and honorably. In that instant, amid the chaos of unexpected labor, the wife experienced a glimpse of hope, a lifeline thrown to her by someone who saw her worth and acted on it, restoring a sense of dignity and trust that had long been absent. The car's engine roared to life, slicing through the night as the stranger guided her into the passenger seat with careful urgency. Every bump in the road sent waves of pain through her body, and each contraction left her gripping the seat in a mix of terror and helplessness. The streets, usually a blur of lights and movement, now seemed ominous and oppressive, mirroring the storm of fear coursing through her veins. She could feel the baby shifting inside her with each jolt, a reminder of both her vulnerability and her responsibility to protect new life amidst chaos. The stranger drove with precision, weaving through traffic with a controlled urgency that contrasted sharply with her racing heartbeat. He kept a steady hand on the wheel, occasionally glancing at her with calm reassurance. "Breathe," he urged softly. "You're stronger than you think. We'll get there." His words, simple yet firm, became a lifeline amid the panic, helping her focus on something beyond the searing pain in her abdomen. Every syllable, every glance, reinforced a trust she hadn't realized she desperately needed. The night air rushed past the windows, carrying the distant sounds of the city, yet inside the car, there was an intense cocoon of focus. Her fear battled with a growing sense of security. Despite the anguish racking her body, she felt her tension ease slightly under his composed presence. Each intersection, each turn, was a heartbeat closer to safety, yet the suspense built with every second, a relentless reminder that time was critical. She couldn't help but contrast this stranger's decisiveness with the absence of her husband. Where her husband had abandoned her in the most crucial hour, this man was unwavering, prioritizing her well-being above all else. She found herself clinging not only to the hope of reaching the hospital safely, but also to the human kindness and competence that radiated from him. With each mile, her fear transformed into cautious reliance, an emotional bridge forming between them born of necessity, trust, and the undeniable intensity of shared urgency. By the time the hospital lights pierced the darkness ahead, the wife's mind was a mix of exhaustion, relief, and disbelief. The journey had been harrowing, yet it revealed a simple truth: in moments of crisis, true character shines through. The stranger's presence had not only carried her toward medical care but had begun to restore her faith in humanity, offering a stark counterpoint to the betrayal she had endured. The hospital room was a flurry of controlled chaos, bright lights glaring down on the wife as she lay on the delivery bed, trembling from both pain and exhaustion. The nurses moved efficiently, their hands steady and voices calm, guiding her through the contractions with practiced precision. Doctors monitored her vital signs, offering instructions and reassurance, yet despite the flurry of professional care, the absence of her husband was a constant, gnawing presence. She had imagined his hand holding hers, words of encouragement whispered in her ear, a steady gaze offering comfort, but instead, she faced the ordeal alone, surrounded by strangers who, while competent and caring, could not fill the void left by betrayal. Each contraction hit with merciless intensity, yet the wife met them with a quiet determination that surprised even herself. Her breaths came in measured bursts, guided by the instructions of the medical team, but also fueled by sheer willpower. She reminded herself repeatedly that she was not merely enduring this pain for herself. She carried the life of her unborn child within her. That realization became both shield and weapon, strengthening her resolve to face every surge of agony with courage, even as tears of frustration and fear streamed down her face. The nurses noticed the strength in her eyes, the unspoken determination that refused to yield to despair. "You're doing wonderfully," one whispered, squeezing her hand with gentle encouragement. Another adjusted her position, ensuring both her comfort and the safety of the baby. In those moments, the wife drew an unexpected sense of camaraderie from the strangers who became her pillars of support. Their calm professionalism contrasted sharply with the emotional neglect she had endured from her husband, underscoring the stark difference between genuine care and performative affection. Hours passed like minutes and eternities at once, every second a test of endurance. Finally, after an agonizing but heroic struggle, the cries of her newborn filled the room, a sound more powerful and triumphant than any applause. Relief, exhaustion, and an overwhelming surge of love washed over her, cementing the bond between mother and child. In that moment, she realized her bravery and resilience had carried her through the ordeal. Despite betrayal, loneliness, and fear, she had emerged not broken, but victorious, stronger, wiser, and fiercely independent, ready to confront whatever awaited her outside the hospital room. Just as the wife clutched her newborn, a storm was brewing far from the hospital room. The millionaire, still basking in the mistress's laughter and attention, received an unexpected message that would shatter his carefully constructed world. Unbeknownst to him, the mistress, so confident, so untouchable, had been concealing secrets that could no longer remain hidden. A trail of lies, manipulation, and financial deceit came to light, revealing that she had been using him for her own gain all along. What he had assumed was loyalty and affection was, in reality, calculated cunning designed to exploit his wealth and influence. The news hit him like a punch to the chest. His face paled, and his mind raced as he realized the depth of her betrayal. Every lavish gift he had given, every indulgent moment shared, had been part of a narrative that served only her. The power he believed he wielded over her suddenly dissolved, replaced by shock, anger, and a gnawing sense of vulnerability. For the first time, he saw the mistress not as a glamorous accessory to his life, but as someone who had manipulated, deceived, and taken advantage of his trust and resources. Meanwhile, the wife, though recovering from her ordeal, began to learn of the twist as well. The tables had turned. The woman who had once overshadowed her, flaunting luxury and indulgence, was now vulnerable, exposed in front of those who had admired her confidence. Her presence no longer commanded respect but invited scrutiny, judgment, and inevitable consequences. The contrast between the wife's bravery during labor and the mistress's unraveling deception became glaringly apparent, reshaping the social dynamics the millionaire had long assumed were in his control. This revelation shifted the power balance entirely. Where once the millionaire had been the orchestrator, a puppet master dividing attention and favor, he now faced the consequences of his misjudgments. The mistress's fall from perceived power illuminated the stark truth. Loyalty, authenticity, and resilience could never be replicated through charm or manipulation. As the news sank in, the millionaire was forced to confront not only his own failings, his neglect, his indulgence, and his misplaced trust, but also the realization that the wife, through her strength and courage, now held the moral high ground, emerging stronger, wiser, and untouchable in a way that the mistress never had been. The moment of confrontation arrived with a tension that seemed to ripple through every room the wife entered. No longer the timid, neglected figure who had endured pain in silence, she now carried herself with an undeniable strength, her posture straight, her gaze steady, and her presence commanding. The mistress, once confident and untouchable, faltered slightly at the sight, sensing for the first time that her perceived dominance had been challenged. The millionaire, too, felt a surge of unease as he watched his wife approach, a mixture of authority, dignity, and restrained fury radiating from her every movement. Words were not wasted. The wife spoke clearly, her voice measured yet firm, cutting through the air of tension. She articulated her hurt, her feelings of betrayal, and the negligence she had endured during the most critical moments of her pregnancy. Her accusations were not fueled by uncontrolled anger but by a calm, unwavering awareness of the truth. She reminded the millionaire of the promises he had made and the choices he had neglected, while addressing the mistress's manipulations and deceit with precision. The social implications of her speech were palpable. Those who had witnessed the events, friends and associates alike, could sense the shifting dynamics and the moral victory she now held. The millionaire, confronted with the undeniable reality of his actions, felt regret wash over him in a tidal wave. Every glance at his wife now carried the weight of shame and recognition of his failings. The mistress's carefully constructed veneer of superiority cracked under the wife's composed confrontation, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Friends, colleagues, and onlookers watched as the scales of power tilted dramatically. The wife's courage had not only reclaimed her dignity but had also illuminated the consequences of deceit, indifference, and misplaced trust. In this moment, the wife's transformation was complete. She had shifted from a figure of vulnerability to one of authority and moral clarity. The confrontation was more than personal, it was symbolic, a testament to resilience, self-respect, and the undeniable strength that emerges when someone refuses to be diminished by betrayal. The millionaire's regret, palpable and immediate, served as a stark reminder of the cost of neglect, while the mistress's exposure underscored the temporary nature of superficial influence. For the wife, the ordeal had forged a newfound sense of empowerment, one that could no longer be overshadowed by luxury, charm, or deception. The days following the confrontation were filled with a quiet, satisfying sense of reclamation. The wife, having endured betrayal, neglect, and humiliation, now walked with a renewed sense of purpose. No longer defined by the whims of a husband who had abandoned her in her moment of greatest need, she embraced the power of independence. Each step she took reflected resilience forged through hardship, a strength born not from privilege but from survival and unwavering determination. She began to view her life and her child's future through a lens of autonomy, understanding that true security came not from others' promises but from her own courage and decisions. Financially, emotionally, and socially, she reclaimed spaces that had long been dominated by others' influence. The mansion, the parties, the elite circles, all became arenas where she moved not in quiet submission, but with confidence and clarity. Her interactions with friends, family, and colleagues were no longer colored by fear of judgment or the desire for approval. Each gesture, each word, reflected the internal transformation she had undergone, from a woman overshadowed and neglected to one whose presence demanded acknowledgement and respect. Her bond with her newborn became a cornerstone of this new life. The challenges of labor and betrayal had strengthened her sense of identity as a mother, making her fiercely protective, yet compassionate and thoughtful. Every decision she made now took into account not only her well-being but also the nurturing of a child who would grow up knowing strength, integrity, and resilience firsthand. The pain of betrayal was tempered by the knowledge that she had emerged victorious, having navigated adversity without losing her dignity or self-worth. Meanwhile, the millionaire and the mistress faced the consequences of their choices. The husband's regret was palpable, but it could not erase the past, and the mistress's exposure ensured that her power and influence were temporary. In contrast, the wife's triumph was enduring, a testament to the idea that true strength is proven in adversity and maintained through integrity. As she stepped forward into her future, she embodied empowerment and self-determination, proving that life, even after betrayal, could be rebuilt stronger, brighter, and on one's own terms. Her story had shifted from one of heartbreak to one of triumph, a new beginning defined by resilience, justice, and the unshakable strength of a woman who refused to be diminished.